Hello, this session will be on understanding percents. So today we are going to be learning about, let me pull up the screen here. This is from pages 98 to 103, that packet. We're going to learn about what a percent means. We're going to understand how to change decimals to percents, how to change percents to decimals. We're going to learn how to change fractions to percents. We're going to learn how to change percents to fractions. And finally, we're going to be able to recognize and become fluent in common fractions and finding their percent equivalent. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you. If you need to pause to get your packet out, you can. And then we're going to be working on page 98 to start with. So here we go. This is percent, and percent is always a part out of a whole. The whole is always 100, and the part is usually less than 100 unless you have something over 100%. Nothing in this packet, I believe, will be over 100%. So actually, if you want to pull down the words right here, in fact, the word percent means by the 100 or per 100. So that's where the 100 is coming from, dividing something into 100 equal parts. So let's take a look at how that works. So if we go down a little bit here, so percent means that a whole has been divided into, we would say, how many equal parts? 100 equal parts. So number 2, 49 cents is 49 over 100 of a dollar, or how much percent of a dollar? Right, 49% of a dollar. 75% of something means 75 of the, how many equal parts of something? 100. I think you get the idea. You're always using a percent out of 100. So I'll let you finish that page. We're going to go on to the next page and get into some of the more math crunching type of problems. Okay, so first of all, the best thing to know is when you are here, when you have a decimal 0.35 and you want to change it to a percent, all you're doing is moving your decimal 2 to the right. So 0.35 as a decimal becomes 35%. If you have this one over here, 0.8, you have to move 2 places, 1, 2, and there, that second spot has to be filled in with something. So you're going to fill it in with a 0. So 0.8 is the same as 80%. Number 3 here, 0.04, you move 2 to the right. That turns out to be 4%. 12.5, you move your decimal 2 to the right. That's the same as 12.5%. This one's a little bit different. You just go 2 to the right, and your percent is actually a decimal percent. So it's really 0.07%. So you can have decimal percents. So let's take a look at some problems below it here. Write each decimal as a percent. So on the first one, you're going to move your decimal 2 to the right. 1, 2. It becomes 32, and then a little percent sign. So 32%. This one, move 2 to the right. Now the decimal is after the 9, so the answer is just 9%. This one here, move the decimal 2 to the right. 1, 2. So you have to fill in your empty space with a 0. So the answer then is 60%. In the last one in this row, you move 2 to the right. 1, 2. You end up with 13.6%. So that's what you're going to be doing on all of those. I might want to just point out this one here. That one would become, moving 2 to the right, 33. 1/3%. So all you do is move your decimal and you still keep the fraction with it. Okay, if we scroll down just a little bit, what they want you to do is be able to quickly recognize how to turn a decimal into a percent. So you're going to just recognize some common percents. So 0.1 becomes 10%, 0.3 becomes 30%, 0.7 becomes 70%, and 0.9 becomes 90%. So they just want you to be able to recognize those. Line those up properly here. The 7 is going to go down 1, and the 9 is pretty close. So yeah, so try to do those quickly and recognize percents from common decimals. Okay, let's clear that and let's go on from there. Now we're going to learn how to change a percent to a decimal. So we're going the opposite direction. So before we were changing a decimal to a percent, now we're going to already have the percent and we got to change it back to a decimal. So what would you think that you would do? Exactly, you would do the opposite of what you just did. So here's some examples here. So 6%, we're going to move the decimal 2 to the left this time. So the decimal starts after the number, and if we jump 2 to the left, we have the decimal here now. We have to fill in our empty space with a 0. That's why we have a 0 over here, so 0.06. So the answer is 0.06. 30%, the decimal starts after the 30, and we go 2 to the left. We end up with 0.3. They dropped the other 0 at the end because you can always drop the 0 at the end of a decimal. So 0.3 or 0.30 would not be wrong, but it's probably better to just write it as 0.3. 150%, move the decimal 2 to the left, you get 1.50 or 1.5. 0.9%, don't be tricked on this kind, you're moving 2 to the left. So let's do that right here. 1, 2, fill in with a 0. So your answer is 0.009. 37.5, move your decimal 2 to the left, 0.37.5. Let's give a couple of those a try on the problems below here. So let's do row 2 right here. So you're moving 2 to the left to change from percent to a decimal. So 3.5% becomes 1, 2 spots, fill in with a 0 on the empty spot. So we end up with 0.035. We'll put the percent sign there because now you're converting it to a decimal. 0.4, you move to the left twice, 1, 2. So 0.004. The next one, 2 to the left, 1, 2, fill in with a 0 on the empty space. So be careful on this one, you're going to end up with 3 zeros and then the number 3. And the last one, you're going to move 2 to the left, 0.216. So far, so good? Great, so let's move on. Get into some of the harder stuff a little bit here. Down below here, they just want you to be able to quickly recognize, just like they wanted you to convert decimals to fractions, to percent. Now they want you to convert percents to decimals very quickly. So if you were to do that, 50% would become 0.5, 25% would become 0.25, 75% would become 0.75, and 20% would become 0.0. So just get comfortable recognizing those equivalents. Move down one to changing fractions to percents. Okay, so this time we're going to be changing fractions to percents. So let's take a look. There's a couple of methods you can use. We'll take a look at the two methods right in this area here. So the first method, if you have a fraction, actually I think I want to move this up a little bit, so I'm going to scroll up just a tad. Circle that. And then what you want to do, a little white space here. So 3/4, we're going to change that over to a percent. So the first method is to multiply the fraction by 100%. So just like it shows there, 100%, and you're going to put the 100 over a 1, and then use your canceling to cancel what you can. So this 4 will divide into 125 times, and 4 will divide into itself 1 time, and then you just multiply across the top and across the bottom. So 3 times 25 on top, and that would be, think about 3/4, yep, 75 on the top, and then on the bottom line here, we have 1 times 1, and 1 times 1 is just 1, so 75 over 1 is equal to just 75%. That's a very common one, so get to know and be familiar with 3/4, 1/2, 1/4, and what the conversion is into fractions. So, into percent. Okay, that's method 1. Method 2, which is another way of doing this, especially if you can't cancel out the 100, is to take the 3, and let me just clear this a little bit, to take the 3 and divide it by the 4. So take the top number and divide it by the bottom number. Let's get a little white space here and do that one. So the 3 will go on the inside, and the 4 will go on the outside. 3/4, top number's 3, goes on the inside. You can't take 4 into 3 to add a decimal and a 0. Don't forget to add the decimal at the top. How many 4s go into 30? 7. Multiply. 4 times 7, 28. And you subtract. Does McDonald's serve burgers? So we divided, we multiplied, and we're subtracting. 30 minus 28 is going to give us 2. And then last step is bring down. So we're going to add another 0, and we're going to bring it down next to the 2. And we say now divide. How many 4s go into 20? 5. That's the divide part. Does McDonald's, that's the multiply part. 4 times 5 is 20. Does McDonald's serve? Serve is the subtraction part. 20 minus 20 is 0. And then finally, burgers is the bring down. We have nothing to bring down. We have a 0 remainder. So once you have the 0.75, it's very easy to convert that into a percent. We know how to do that from the previous pages. We just move our decimal 2 to the right. If we were to move this 2 to the right, 1, 2, we get 75%. So either method will give you the answer, 75%. Okay, let's give a couple a try here. So let's look at the first one. We have 2/5, and we have to make that into a percent. Now, we have a couple ways we could do this. Let's use method 1, and the reason I want to use method 1 on this one is I see that 5 will divide evenly into 100. So I'm just going to multiply 2/5 times 100%. We'll put 100 over 1, and then I can use my lovely canceling method to cancel some of that out. So 5 will go into 100 20 times. 20 times 5 is 100. And 5 will go into itself 1 time. And now I just multiply across the top and across the bottom. So I have 2 times 20 on top. That will be 40. And I have 1 times 1 on the bottom. And that will be 1. So 40 over 1 is the same as 40%. So the answer to this first one here is 40%. So 2/5 is equivalent to 40% of something. Okay, the next one is 1/4. That's a good common one that you need to memorize. We could use method 1 on this one, but let's use method 2 just to get a look at it. So I'm going to make a little bit of white space here so we have some room to do our division. We're using method 2 on this one. We want to take the top number on the inside, bottom number on the outside. Sorry, I have a dog. Okay, so 4 will not go into 1. I'm going to put a decimal and a 0. Put the decimal up here. How many 4s go into 10? 2. 2 times 4 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Now I'm going to add another 0 and bring it down. How many 4s go into 20? 5. Multiply. 4 times 5 is 20. Subtract. 20 minus 20 is 0. So now we have 0.25, and to change that into a percent, we move the decimal 2 to the right, which then would be equal to 25%. And that's a very common one to know, that 1/4 is 25%, 1/2 is 50%, 3/4, like we did in our example, is 75%. So there's that one. We could use the first method on this one, so let's see how that looks. It would be 1/4, just a few less steps using this method, times 100% over 1. And you know that you can cancel the 4 into the 100. It will go into there 25 times. And 4 goes into itself 1 time, and you'll end up with 1 times 25 on top and 1 times 1 on the bottom. You can eliminate the 1 on the bottom and you just get 25%. So either method, whatever you feel is easier for you. Let's clear and do a few more. Let's do 1/3. That's the next one in the row here. Now notice that if I were to multiply 1/3 times 100, that's not going to cancel out really easily, is it? If I was to do this and multiply, 3 won't go evenly into 100, so there's nothing I can really cancel. So instead, I'm going to use the second method. When I see that there isn't something to cancel, I'll use the second method. So now I'm going to take the top number and put it on the inside. 1 goes on the inside, and the 3 goes on the outside. And I say, okay, you can't take 3 into 1, so you put a decimal and a 0. The decimal up here right away. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Bring down another 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Now I could continue, couldn't I? I could put another 0 here and bring it down, and I'd get 10 again, and then I would end up getting 9. So it would be a continual 0.3 repeating. So there's a couple ways to write this. You could write, well, we want to change it to percent, so we have to go 2 to the right, right? So we could write 33.3. Oops, that's supposed to be a 3 with a line over the 3%. That means that I'm going to erase that 3. That means that the 3 repeats itself forever and ever and ever. So that's one way of writing it. Your answer book will actually write it like this. It will take the remainder after you've gone to 2 decimal places, and it will bring it up to the top and make the remainder become the numerator, and it will make the 3 become the denominator. So another way of writing this is 33.3 1/3%. If you were to divide 1 by 3, obviously we'll get that 0.3 repeating. So both of those are correct ways of writing 1/3 as a percent. So anytime you have a number on the bottom that is a multiple of 3, like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, you are going to get a repeating decimal. Let's try 3/8. Now 8 isn't going to divide into 100 evenly, so I am going to use the second method, 3 on the inside, 8 on the outside, put a decimal and a 0. How many 8s go into 30? 3, right? 3 times 8 is 24. 4 times 8 would be over just a little bit. So, and subtract 30 minus 24 is 6. We're going to bring a 0 down. How many 8s in 60? 7, right? 7 times 8 is 56. Now we subtract 60 minus 56 is going to give us 4. Now we're going to bring down another 0. And 4. How many 8s in 40? Right? 5. 5 times 8. This line a little longer here. 5 times 8 is 40. 40 minus 40 is 0. And now we are done. We've gotten to a remainder of 0. So 3/8 is the same as 0.375. Change that over to a percent. Move your decimal 2 to the right. It's the same as 37.5%. Or if you like the fraction way, it'd be 37 1/2%. The way the 1/2 comes in, you would have the remainder of 4. You'd bring it up to become the numerator, and 8 would become your denominator. So you'd have 0.37 4/8, which reduces down to 1/2. So either method will work for your answer, 37.5 or 37.5%. Let's clear that. So you've got a lot of those to convert over to percents. Let's look at changing percents to fractions. So there's a couple of different ways. I'll just do some problems rather than look at this example here. So I'd like to look at the first one right here. 35%, your first step when you're changing it into a fraction is to put 35 over the number. What is percent always over? 35 parts out of 100, right? So 35 100ths, and then you just reduce. So I know that 5 will go into 35 7 times, and I know that 5 will go into 100 20 times. So 35% is equivalent to 7/20. Let's look at 20%. That's 20 over 100. 100 equal parts. And I know I can divide the top by 20 and get 1. And I can divide the bottom by 20 and get 5. So 20% is the same as 1/5. Gets a little bit more complicated when you have percent with a fraction. So what you're really doing is you're going 12.5%. You're doing the same method, but you're going to do a couple extra things to deal with the fraction. So 12.5 becomes over 100. And now, make a little white space here so we get a little more space to write. Now what you're doing is you're going to change 12.5 to an improper fraction. So remember how to do that. You take the whole number times the bottom plus the top. So 12 times 2, that's 24, plus 1 is 25. So that's equal to 25 on the top, and it's 25 halves, right? Because you keep the same number on the bottom, all over 100 parts. Now I'm going to just do another little extra step to see how this works. I'm going to put 100 over 1. That means the same thing as 100. So now what I really have is a division problem. A little more space here. So I really have 25 over 2 divided by 100 over 1. So let's see what happens when I do this. So that's the same as saying I have 25 over 2 divided by 100 over 1. And then I use the keep, change, flip method when I'm dividing with fractions. So I keep the first fraction, 25 over 2, and I change, keep, change, flip, I change the division sign to multiplication. And the flip part is I flip the second fraction to put the 1 on top and the 100 on the bottom. Now I can cancel. So I can take 25 into 100 4 times and 25 into itself once. And now I just multiply across the top. 1 times 1 on the top. 1 times 1. And on the bottom I have 2 times 4. And that gives me 1 on top, 8 on the bottom. So 1/8. So 12.5% is equal to 1/8 as a fraction. That is the official answer. We'll circle that one so we see it. So 12.5% equals 1/8. So we'll do another example like that because some of those are kind of a little bit harder. Let's clear. So let's do a couple more. Let's do 6%. And let's do 37.5. No, let's do 66 2/3%. So let's look at the 6% one first. 6% is the same as 6 over 100, and then just reduce. How many can you reduce the top and bottom by? Well, you can divide the top by 2 and you get 3. 6 divided by 2 is 3. You can divide 100 by 2 and get 50. And that's as far as you can reduce it. So 6% is the same as 3 over 50. Let's look at one more of the fraction ones here, 66 2/3. I'm going to make some white space here. So first thing we do is we say, okay, it's 66 2/3 over 100 equal parts. Then I'm going to change 66 2/3 into an improper fraction. So 66 times 3 on the bottom, whole number times the bottom, 99. Oh, no, it isn't. It's 18, carry the 1, 198. So 66 times 3 is 198, plus I add the top, 199, 200. So I now have 200 over 3. And now I put that over the 100 that I had it over. And I'm going to add a 1 on the bottom here, so it's really the same as 100 over 1. So now I have 200 over 3 divided by 100 over 1. So I'm going to rewrite that just so you see what I'm doing. 200 over 3 divided by 100 over 1. I'm going to use my keep, change, flip. Keep the first fraction or the top fraction the same. Change the sign to multiplication and flip the bottom fraction. 1 goes on top, 100 goes on the bottom. And now cancel where I can. So I can divide 200 by 100 and get 2. I can divide 100 by 100 and get 1. And then when I multiply across the top and across the bottom, I get 2 times 1 is 2. And on the bottom, I get 3 times 1 is 3. So 66 2/3% is the same as the fraction 2/3. Okay. All right. Let you try a few of those on your own at home. Let's move on to a new concept here. This one here is common fractions and percents. Again, they just want you to get familiar with some of the very common ones. And I said the 1/2, 1/4, 3/4 one is a very common one. So 1/4 is 25%. And 3/4 is, 75%. So you can go ahead and do some of those other ones and get familiar with what those would be. And start kind of memorizing some of those. And that is the end of the packet. So stop sharing here. And good luck, and reach out if you have any questions. See you later. Bye.